Will also be available after tonight's event. Tonight's questions come from a mix of sources, many of which include you. We want you to drop your questions in those YouTube comments or tweet us at CitrusTV News. Tonight's questions have not been screened by essay or the candidates. The first portion of tonight's event will focus on the essay comptroller candidate, Nia Jones. Later on, we will hear from the presidential and vice presidential candidates. Since there is only one candidate for each of these positions, tonight's live stream will function as a town hall rather than a debate to allow for the student body to get to know the candidates. The essay comptroller is the head of the essay financial board. The board is responsible for making essays financial decisions, which include allocating the student activity fee to the 300 plus registered student organizations on campus. Nia, why don't we start by having you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us why you feel you're qualified to serve as the essay comptroller.
Absolutely. I just want to start by saying good evening to our Orange family, and thank you so much for joining us virtually here tonight. Your vote really does matter. My name is Nia Jones, and I'm a sophomore student here at Syracuse University with a passion and love for our student body, and that is why I'm running for comptroller tonight. If elected, I would like to make the finance board more accessible to students and grow in a way that benefits the student body as a whole. This means to be transparent, accessible, and open to change. Transparent in the way of using social media as a tool to allow students to know about what's going on in finance board and even essay as a whole. Accessible in a way of giving RSOs the opportunity to be paired with a finance member of their choosing to get another point of contact in regards to questions about what's going on in finance board and their budgets. And open to change in a way by allowing an open door policy for students to drop in at the Shine Center and ask me questions or even give their input into how I could be doing a better job, and by allowing, if the student body is willing, to update the finance codes. Thank you.
Thanks, Nia. Before we go any further, I'm interested to hear about your experience and why you think it makes you qualified for this position.
Absolutely. So I have actually been on the finance board. This is my second year serving on the board as a voting member. I'm also a member of several organizations on campus and do other activities in both sports as well as other educational avenues as well. And I'm also on Student Association as an assembly member as a representative for Falk.
So, like all the candidates here, you are running unopposed. How do you think that's going to impact voter turnout? For comptroller specifically, how are you encouraging students to vote?
I think it's really important. Even though I am running unopposed, it's important for you to know who you're voting for and what you're getting with me. I feel like, one, just being here and attending this virtually tonight is a really great way for students to know what we're all about, as well as even following me on my Instagram page for updates. That's Nia Jones for Essay Comptroller.
Thanks, Nia. Let's get to our next question here in a moment. So this year, like all the candidates here, you ran unopposed. So actually, we were just talking about that. One of the things that you deal with is the budget. So this year, each budget was either fully approved or fully denied. Is that a goal that you hope to accomplish again this year?
Honestly, my goal overall is not just to fully approve or deny, it's to give students the opportunity to have the events or initiatives that they'd really like to have, and just being able to give boards or organizations the opportunity to gain that funding.
So over the past few days, the Student Association has asked students to submit their own questions for the comptroller. One student asked about how vaccinations increase and how we look forward to the relative normalcy next semester. How do you see SU-sponsored programming and policies being adjusted, or do you think that they should stay the same as they are now in the coming semester?
I think we should do what's best to keep our student body safe. In order for us to even enjoy those events, we have to be safe and healthy in order to do that. But even this year, we saw a lot of budgets that came in with a COVID compliance form that all organizations who wanted to host in-person events or even online events had to fill out, so just kind of abiding by those university-placed guidelines.
And tell us, how do you plan to pick your staff?
Well, for starters, we already have so many wonderful and amazing members on finance board, but we do also open applications for that in the fall, or I do believe the fall and the spring. So just by picking people who, one, I feel like are very competent and are dedicated to the student body and just have a genuine care and compassion for the finance board and knowledge about what's going on.
Thanks. So on the same note, as activities are allowed to expand in person, are you open to additional changes to budgets?
Yes. I think that is something that is very important and I hold very near and dear to my heart. I think that the finance codes do, while they are great as is, I think they do need to be updated and give the chance and opportunity for minority RSOs to be able to hold those bigger events and kind of get their initiatives met.
Okay. Thank you, Naya. And coming up, we hear from the candidates running for Student Association President and Vice President. They will answer your questions right here after the break. Stay with us.
They said a bottle was just a bottle. That no one would ever notice me. But I knew I could be more. That one day, I would make people smile.
Welcome back to Citrus TV's Student Association Town Hall Forum. The next portion of the forum will focus on the candidates for SA President and Vice President, David Bruin and Darnell Stinfort. Let's take a look at the rules for this portion of the forum. The presidential and vice presidential candidate will get 2 minutes to respond to questions from the moderator. They will each have 1 minute to respond to any follow-ups. After that, the candidates will have 30 seconds to respond to any further clarifications. We're going to give the floor now to the candidates for SA President and Vice President to give their opening statements. You both have 2 minutes to introduce yourselves. Let's start with our Vice Presidential candidate, Darnell Stinfort. Darnell?
Hello and good evening, everybody. My name is Darnell Stinfort. I'm from Quincy, Massachusetts, and I'm a junior studying biotechnology. I am running for Vice President of Student Association alongside my friend David, who is running for President. I believe we're best fit for these roles because we bring to the table novel ideas and perspectives that are seen throughout our platforms and represent exactly what we stand for. David has a background of being BEM chair and speaker of SA, giving us an internal perspective of how SA works, and I have the outside perspective of how SA works and is seen by the students that are not necessarily involved in SA. However, our contrasting points of views we have a great deal of similarities, like our optimistic attitude, fighting the big and small issues, also understanding that we cannot do this alone. We are to our students, and in order for change to occur, it starts with all of us. We are extremely passionate about improving student life. In order to promote and improve student experience, it starts by listening to the needs of the students, addressing the dire concerns and issues, and lastly, advocating for those changes. We want to continue to change the outlook on SA through our transparency and by continuing to keep students informed of how SA works and to inform that SA is for SU and ESF students. We encourage you to vote on my slide starting Monday, April 26th, to have your voices heard. Thank you.
Thanks, Darnell. Now we go to our presidential candidate, David Bruin. David?
Thank you. My name is David Bruin. My pronouns are he, him. I'm studying political science and policy studies. I'm a sophomore, and I'm from Rockland County, New York. Before I begin, I'd like to say that we acknowledge, with respect, the Onondaga Nations, the firekeepers of the Haudenosaunee, the indigenous people on whose ancestral lands Syracuse University now stands. And before we also dive into our policies, I'd like to say this. Thank you, Citrus TV, for hosting us tonight. Yesterday, at SUNY Oswego, our fellow student association over there at our university neighbors sadly defunded media organizations on campus. And so we'd like to say now and here that we commit to supporting with equal access and adequate funding our campus media organizations. As for our pillars, we're advocating and fighting for financial accessibility. We're talking about a tuition freeze and having a fixed tuition program so that in the future, students don't have to deal with the financial stress of rising tuition. We're talking about free washing, drying, and printing for all students. In terms of health and safety, we're calling for an overhaul of DPS, bringing back the Advocacy Center, and improving mental health resources on campus. In terms of academic advancements, we're talking about being able to build your own major, prioritize experiential learning and undergraduate TAs, and have a university-wide requirement for community service. In terms of community inclusivity, we want all students to have equal voting rights. We will support and stand in solidarity with all marginalized students and student movements. And lastly, we want SU to go carbon neutral by 2026. That is why we've released our Green New Deal for SU. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first topic tonight is the topic which has shaped so much of our lives this past year, COVID-19. SU is requiring every student without an exemption to be vaccinated by the start of in-person fall classes. The big question on so many students' mind are when things will get back to normal. Our question is, should the university relax on-campus restrictions as soon as similar restrictions are relaxed within local municipalities? In other words, if mask mandates are removed in Onondaga County, should Syracuse University remove their mask mandate? A reminder, together you have 2 minutes to answer the question and answer. You have question and extra minute and a half for any follow-ups, clarifications. David, we will start with you.
Our position has and always will be to follow the science. That is what the university has said as well. And so, yes, we do believe that if restrictions or guidelines change, that the university should follow those. This fall, hopefully, we'll be coming back to campus, vaccinated, shots in arms, and ready to go back in person without even having to wear masks, hopefully. If guidelines are still requiring us to wear masks, we will both be wearing our masks, I can tell you that for sure. And we hope and expect all students will as well. If you want to add anything?
Yeah. I believe, again, we're following the science and we're students as well. We are not the makers of the vaccine, so there is potential for COVID to continue to spread even with the vaccine. So I think it is important that we continue to have safety precautions, even though the vaccine has been distributed throughout the students.
So you don't believe that SU should, so you don't believe that SU should keep any of those restrictions in place if the county gets rid of them, specifically like mask mandates, like capacity limits?
I think it depends. I think we can start opening up and seeing how the numbers go and seeing how many students are in quarantine, how many students are getting infected. So I think it depends on how the climate of our campus really shows in that result.
So you're open to maybe a slower return here on campus? Okay. So looking back on the COVID-19 pandemic, what do you think the university has done right? How could the university, in your view, have handled the pandemic differently?
Well, I think I speak for many of the students here on campus when I say that we do hope and wish that the university had equally applied the guidelines we've seen in this campus community, that may not have been the case. And so going forward, we hope and we'll be calling on the university to ensure that that is the case. Yeah, that's really it.
And to touch on the things that the university has done right is making sure students were tested before coming on campus, making sure they had the negative results, so that reduced spreading tremendously. We've seen peer institutions who have had to close their campuses a couple of weeks into the semester. So we have been doing really good on keeping tabs on who's negative and trying to prevent the spread going further.
We know that student athletes hosted a maskless party this winter that gained a lot of attention. For some students, the university's response has raised some questions about whether athletes receive special treatment from the university. When it comes to following SU's code of conduct, your campaign calls for equal enforcement of guidelines. how do you expect these guidelines to be enforced? And what do you say to students who are already vaccinated?
Well, look, we started this year with a freshman gathering on the quad of hundreds of people. And we know for a fact that not all of those people were adequately disciplined. And people at parties that are literally breaking state laws should be disciplined by the university in some way. I don't think it's unfair to say that. And so, again, we are talking about equal enforcement going forward, whether it's with vaccines, whether it's with testing, whether it's with mask wearing. Across the board, all students should be treated equally and have their disciplines given equally.
I agree. There's really nothing to be said because as a university, you're supposed to treat students as equals. And we haven't really seen that. So we're just holding to the standard of which they told us that enforcement will be equal. So that's really all I have to say on that.
The next question is from a student. The pandemic has changed the lives of students on campus tremendously this year, and although vaccines are here, students are still facing strict measures and policies across campus. For example, students still cannot visit their friends in other dorms due to COVID-19 regulations. As SA President and Vice President, how will you make sure that students can get the privileges of visiting other dorms back?
Well, again, we're hoping to follow state guidelines. We can certainly want to visit our friends. I know I do. But ultimately, the university and we as student leaders have to follow the science and implement the best policy that's best for our public health.
And as we go further with the guidelines, as we are able to meet with more and more people, I think it's important for us to follow that and probably try increasing the number of people that can enter dorms, maybe slowly, again, see how that works out. And as long as we're following the guidelines and up to the CDC, we will see how that goes. But potentially that's not really in our hands right now.
Got it. Thank you. We now move on to our next topic tonight, racial unrest in America. With highlighting the recent conviction of Derek Chauvin earlier this week, lots of people across the nation have sought solutions when it comes to police reform. Before we jump into this issue, I want to ask you something a little bit more simple. Do you feel safe both day and night as you walk on and around SU's campus?
For me, I don't, especially at night as a Black woman. It's something that I think we don't even realize as women walking at night. We're thinking of scenarios, what to do. If someone comes behind me, what am I going to do? How am I prepared to run and get away from a potential incident? So in that case, I don't think there's really a safe space as a woman of color. And yeah, I think that really sums it up for me.
Yeah, and as for myself, I come from a very different background and have a very different experience. I am visibly a white man, and so I may not feel the same sense of danger that any of my other peers may feel. Ultimately, I think, this is about ensuring safety for students on this campus. That's why we're talking about DPS overhaul. That's why we're talking about having transparency with DPS policies. And let me just end with this. I am a white man, but I'm also Jewish. And when there was a spate of hate incidents that were happening in our community, they may not have been directed at me, but I could feel the ripple effects of that for sure. And so we got to realize that this may affect way more students than we recognize in our daily lives. And again, our leadership and our campaign is about doing what's right for students so they can feel safe and healthy on this campus.
So here on campus, Loretta Lynch's review of the Department of Public Safety revealed that many students say they already know that there is distrust between students and DPS. It also found that DPS didn't follow their policies always when it comes to investigating bias incidents. How deep do you believe DPS reforms need to go? and what will you do to make sure that they happen? You're mentioning significant overhaul.
Yeah, we're talking about significant overhaul because we have seen a long history at this university of violence and danger towards students of color. And so we are talking about some things that were mentioned in the Loretta Lynch report, like expanding community policing and having better transparency around standards of practices. But we do also understand that this ultimately comes down to students getting involved and engaged. That's why we're talking about students getting involved in our campaign, so that they can support us in making this change even more possible. Because with just our voices, it's, and in these positions, in these roles, it becomes a little easy. But with 1,000 students behind us, supporting us in this change, for all of us, that becomes a lot more easy and feasible to do.
Yeah, and in our policy under health and safety, we have seen, other peer institutions have spreadsheets on bias trainings that they've done for their DPS officers, where students can, search up a name, see how many times that bias training that officer has been in that training. If it's lacking, that's a discussion we can have to implement, further training. I mean, again, biases don't just disappear one time. We need to continually drill this in people's heads, because we all subconsciously have biases. And the point is to destroy that, to really see a person for who they are, and if they're not threatening, or if they are, then give them the equal and give them the right punishment for any crimes that they have done.
We know that DPS Chief Bobby Maldonado will be retiring on August 1st. How do you expect to work with any new leader of DPS, and how do you hope to influence them specifically?
Well, let me begin by saying that as a leader in the Student Association already, I've had the opportunity to have frequent conversations with Bobby Maldonado, the chief. In fact, I spoke with him earlier today. We do plan on having a strong relationship with the chief going through this transition, and whoever the new chief is, because it's to get what we want and need as students, that's vital. We may not always disagree, in fact, more often than not, but we're doing this for all students, and that is exactly why we plan to work with the people in these positions, not just DPS. It may sound not great that we want to work with them, that we're so eager to work with them, but this is necessary for the change that we're trying to bring about.
Yeah, and again, with change, understanding and listening has to be a part of that. We're not talking over each other and just disagreeing can get us so far, or not far at all. So it's coming to a solution by really talking and addressing these problems head on, and making sure we have results, and making sure that communication is still there and that transparency continues.
The SU Board of Trustees is recommending that the university removes all South Campus housing due to reports that a greater percentage of students of color are moving to South Campus in their sophomore year. What do you believe should happen here? Should SU get rid of South Campus housing specifically?
Well, look, this is an issue that affects so many different issues. With South Campus, as you pointed out, a lot of students of color, frankly, move to South Campus in their sophomore or junior year because they feel more comfortable. And the university has planned this for a long time because of a lot of logistical things where they've rented out a lot of the apartments. I'm not going to get into that, but the university plans to also create tons of more dormitories all across campus. And that is going to drastically affect our environment. And so as leaders now, and who will be affecting decisions that will have impacts for the next 20 years, we're going to ensure, one, that these dormitories are inclusive and students of color can feel safe, and that the university is taking action to offset the environmental impact of those dorms. You know, the university has made some progress in the past, but they're planning on expanding a lot more and producing a lot more energy and putting a lot more pollutants into the environment. And so it takes leadership now, bold leadership now, to work with the university to implement policies that are going to ensure the safety and the prosperity of our university's future.
Yeah, and with that being said, I live on South, and I know students of color gravitate towards South because it gives us a greater sense of community that we don't really feel in this school. Being 6% Black students or students of color, there's only so much community, so many spaces for you to feel that. So I do believe that in order for the university to continue with this initiative, to really be aware of how the students feel. And again, that's why we're here to listen and to hear your needs. And if you disagree with this, let us know. We are here to advocate for you with the administration.
Let's focus in now on the Not Again SU movement. Your platform says you support it and other recent campus movements. In their latest Instagram post, the group said that they will not work with administrators moving forward. They say progress on their demands is not being made and real work isn't being done. Is that what you believe? And with organizers no longer meeting with administrators, is that space that you hope to play a major role in?
Look, to get any substantial policy change in this university, in this country, people need to go about it through multiple paths. And we totally respect and understand Not Again SU's decision to not cooperate or not work with the university. That's totally fine. As student leaders, we've committed, obviously, to work with the university and push for, again, what students want and need with the university. Sorry.
Yeah, I totally agree. A great point what David's saying. There's definitely many avenues to a solution, to a goal that we have in common for Not Again SU and their demands. I think that as students, I think it's great to be open-minded and seeing new paths of what are better ways for administration to listen to us. Okay, we tried this way, let's try another way. You know, not to give up, because that's what change is about, and that's what we're really promoting here. So we definitely do stand with Not Again SU, and we definitely are trying not to give up on that stance of promoting that change.
Do you believe that progress is being made on their demands?
No.
So we now have a question from a student that focuses on the events that sparked the Not Again SU protests in fall of 2019. What initiatives are you taking to combat racially biased incidents that happen on campus?
Yeah, look, as we said, transparency from DPS is a major issue. You know, that doesn't stop the original source, but that's something that students need to know. Something we're also, through SA, have been working on is ensuring a smooth transition away from STEM to the FYS program. We know we can't teach away hate and bias, especially in one class, but we're hoping that this change brings out a positive impact. And then as leaders of the Student Association, we're talking about expanding initiatives and doing a lot more through SA to aid in that effort.
Yeah, and with that, there's so many proven research that has said that diversity in students in academic settings promotes better academic outcomes in the world, in many different avenues and careers and industries. So promoting that in students, as well as trying to advocate and bring back the posse programs and doing the best we can with helping with inclusivity in this school, in this university, the best way we know how, and talking to administrators and not giving up, we are willing to do that.
Let me just add one final point. There was a statistic released in the Daily Orange that applications from students of color have dropped by a substantial amount this past year. And speaking to Darnell's point, that means that there will likely be less students of color in this upcoming class. And that's a terrible thing, because for the next 4 years, that class is going to deal with less diversity. So we've got to prioritize this at all levels.
Thank you. And when we come back, we'll take a look at the students' relationship with the university and how SA can help improve it. Stay with us.
Here we go. We're gonna go out there in the rain. You're gonna get wet. All right, here we go. Oh, no. Oh, look at the rain. Okay, quick. Oh, yeah, yes. So much fun. Mwah. Yeah, Dad. We're getting so wet. Oh,
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. A quick reminder that if you have questions, you can leave them in the YouTube comments. Our next topic will be the relationship between SU and the student body. The results of SU's climate survey found that 43% of students are unsatisfied with the climate here on campus. What needs to change and how you work to fix it? This, again, goes back to some of those questions about DPS, about diversity.
Do you want to start?
Going to specifics, we can't just have a solution for everything and just have it all done. Our campaign is really listening to students, and we have our platforms and seeing which one of those, or if any or few, they want to prioritize in changing that and helping that relationship with Syracuse and the student and really bridging that together. With that being said, I think it's important for the university to listen to the students' needs, because we chose Syracuse for our higher education, and I think that says a lot. It's an investment.
I mean, you asked what needs to be done. I mean, what doesn't have to be done? We need to do a lot. Frankly, we have so much on our pillars. The best thing I can say is check out our social media, check out our website to find more information. We're going to be talking about it as we have throughout, but there is so much to do. And really, what it takes to get it done is bold action, bold leadership. That's why we've been talking about going carbon neutral, having a Green New Deal. In fact, we released today on Earth Day our Green New Deal proposal. And we're doing this because for the past 10 years, student association campaigns and administrations have been defined by small and short-term ideas. But we're going to focus on that too. But we're also focusing on big, long-term ideas, thinking about the next 10 years. Because while we are students here, most of us, for 4 years, we've got to look beyond that. So I didn't answer your question in much specifics, but that is our overarching mindset and belief.
Thank you. Moving to another study, a university commission study found that many students don't trust anything the university says. Instead, students rely on social media for what they consider good information. That's what the study found. The question is, do you trust the university?
Not entirely. Not always. Look, we've been lied to by leaders before, not just at this university, but beyond. So can we always trust them? No. Do we want to? Yes. And that's why we're calling for transparency and honesty in statistics when it regards to homelessness on campus, or DPS, or academics. That is a step forward that the university can take. But as you pointed out, social media is a really big part. And so we're planning on increasing SA's social media presence to make us a more direct, informative body for students, and so we can better advocate for students. Part of the problem, you pointed out 43% of students are dissatisfied. If the other 57% were really informed on all the details of the university, like that 43% probably is, I'm sure a lot of them would probably be even more dissatisfied. So an information campaign and better publicity through social media for SA is going to be critical going forward.
I think transparency with the university is definitely called upon with our campaign. It's necessary for students to trust their institution. And trust comes with answering questions. Why are certain things happening? Why is this in place? If we knew these certain answers, I think there would be a better relationship with the students and the administration. So I think it's on the administration to take that time to really get that relationship and be transparent with the students.
Last point, I think most students want the university to not use their PR consultants to support them in their communications, but rather to speak honestly, directly to us as students, because we're paying thousands of dollars to go here.
So what about for you specifically? You are SA. How can you work with administrators if you're not sure if you can trust them? How can you specifically get your goals done if you have to work with them and you're not sure if you can trust them?
It goes with just that, building a relationship, understanding different perspectives, right? This is what our campaign is basically about. Yes, we can feel unable to trust the administration from a distance, but as we begin to continue campaign for this SA election and continue to see the side of the administration and the many, I guess, avenues that they have to deal with in terms of money, we can work with the administration. So I think that, a relationship definitely helps in that, and understanding and transparency once again.
And to add on to that, listen, maybe there are some administrators watching right now, and let me say this. We are maybe coming off pretty strong right now, but we're not unwilling to negotiate. We're not unwilling to fight for students and achieve some reasonable outcome. But the point of this campaign and the point of us running as student leaders is to advocate and employ the passion of students, because if we didn't, we wouldn't get anything done, and we would be business as usual. And we can't have business as usual anymore. So that's it. Sorry.
On the issue of sexual assault, we saw surveys in recent months that show about 19% of SU students have been sexually assaulted, and 95% of those don't even report their assaults. How are you going to push administration to make sure that those who experienced unwanted sexual contact feel comfortable sharing their stories?
Yeah, that same report also said that of those 95%, roughly 70% know the resources and the place to go, but choose not to. And that's a problem. We think that's a problem because students don't feel comfortable, right? That's a pretty expressed theme and statistic throughout the report. And so what do we have to do? We have to implement policy to ensure that students can feel comfortable if they have such a situation. That's why we're talking about bringing back the Advocacy Center, a central place where mental health resources and crisis response and other organizations like Vera House can be centralized in one location to address their concerns.
Yeah, and again, we are building off what we can. What we see, what we research, and see what would be best for the university and for students as well. And even if we cannot find a centralized location, David and I has talked about a website where all of the information can be centralized in one place, because students during that vulnerable time, it's hard to go from DPS to Barn Center. Having everything in one location will definitely ease that.
Thanks, guys. Let's move on to campaign commitments. You mentioned a lot about financial accountability on your campaign pillars document. SU's total cost of attendance, that includes tuition, is inching pretty close to $80,000 already. Your plan has things such as a fixed tuition program, free printing, and cheaper textbooks. However, you also mentioned addressing student homelessness and poverty. How big of an issue do you think this is, and what will you do to address this?
Tuition's a big problem. It is. In fact, to the sum of, as you pointed out, over $70,000. With homelessness, we don't know. The whole point that we keep bringing up throughout this campaign is transparency from the university. We don't know how many students are homeless. We don't know how many students are on the edge of homelessness or poverty. And so we've got to get those numbers, but then also at the same time address the issue. Provide housing that's not temporary, and expand resources like the Hendricks Food Pantry that provide food insecure students with meals. And we've also got to do it in a way that makes students feel comfortable, because a lot of them refuse to even use that resource because of the potential social perception that it might provide other students. So we've got to take, again, bold action here to address homelessness, tuition, the whole thing.
Agreed. Can you repeat the question again?
I'll maybe be able to ask it in a different way. So you mentioned the fixed tuition as something you are very much hoping gets done. Students have pushed in the past in petitions to make it so SU does not raise tuition. They continue to raise tuition. Why do you think this might be any different, your effort specifically?
I think it's a bit ridiculous to be raising the tuition to $80,000. That's crazy. It's already an expensive institution, and I think with students obviously dedicating, many undergrads dedicating their efforts and investments in this institution, I think there has to be some sort of middle ground with Syracuse and the students in the fixed tuition costs.
Let me add on this. In 2014, the university hired Bain Consulting to do an entire diagnostic report on the university. And they found that Syracuse University was deep back in the pack of students' tuition charging. And what did they do over the next decade? Drastically raise tuition well above inflation pretty much every single year. So now they're at the top, and that's great. We're at the top of tuition. But have our educational quality increased? Has our university resources increased? Sure, in some ways, but not enough. And again, that's why we're talking about bold action, talking about bringing back the Advocacy Center, talking about overhauling DPS, talking about going carbon neutral, expensive, bold initiatives that are going to take university leadership to get on board with what students want. So, yeah.
You've said that past essay campaigns and administrations were judged on the big ideas only. Why are the little ideas the main focus for you two as well? Why are some of those little ideas, what are some of those little ideas that you have in mind?
Well, sorry.
You're good.
You know, we don't want to leave any student behind. And, you know, homelessness is a big issue in a level of importance, but it's also a small issue because it probably affects a very small number of students. It's never been, as far as I know, talked about in an essay campaign before. And so that's why we're bringing it up, because it is so important. That affects basically every decision in that student's life. I don't know who that student is, but we have to help them. We have to do more. So this extends throughout everything. You know, something I want to add actually to this, you know, to the big ideas, little ideas, is in essay platforms, they've been limited. And they've limited to programming ideas and smaller, short-term ideas. But what we're talking about are these big ideas and the little ones, so that, again, we're covering all our bases. Because we're leaving anyone out, we're going to fall behind as a university.
Yeah. And I think the little ideas deserve as much attention as the big ideas, because it's the little ideas we see every day as students. Just like at College Place where we have the heaters, it's those little things that make our student experience that much better. So instead of just waiting for the bus being cold, a student association administration in the past was able to enforce that and put that and help us students in our everyday needs. So it's through those little things that could really change a student's whole experience.
Thank you. In your campaign ad, you mentioned that you want everyone to vote. However, SA was barely able to get 10% turnout on that constitutional election that I know that you were very involved in. How will you change voter turnout in your administration so as many students as possible are participating in the student democracy?
Yeah, I'll sorry, I'm taking a lot of the questions. As the former Board of Elections and Membership Chair, I'll say this. Our lowest turnout ever was 10%, and our highest turnout ever was 30%. And that was back around 2012. So it's been a while that we've gotten some really high turnout. And we're calling on every student to vote, hoping that that will happen, but probably knowing that we're not going to hit 100%. We're optimists, so that's why we'd like to hit that goal. But we're hoping to land somewhere in the sort of regular 10 to 30% range, which is higher than a lot of public universities, but also behind some of our peer institutions. Ultimately, higher voter turnout, we're saying this because our goal is to engage a mass movement of students behind the vision that we're offering, behind student leadership and student advocacy. So that's going to take a lot. We come with a lot of humility about that fact. But we're doing this town hall. We have a fairly good social media presence because we want students to be informed and engaged, join SA, and vote for us.
And also with voting turnout, due to COVID, it has restricted us a lot in that sense that we have to use social media for most of our campaigning, reaching out to students. So using campaigning and obviously in person as well, campaigning to students and hearing their thoughts, hearing their issues and their perspective of how it's like being a student on this campus. That is our way of campaigning, and hopefully with both those combined, we can get a great turnout.
So you're both running unopposed. All the candidates this year are running unopposed. How do you prove to the student body that you deserve this position if you are running unopposed?
Look, we're asking people to vote for us in this election, not just for us, but for the vision that we're offering for the future of SU. We want to reimagine the way that this university works. And that is not an easy feat and cannot be done alone. And it's true, we're running against no other person or another campaign, but what this election is about, because we have this opportunity, is ideas. In this election, you can choose to vote for another year, like the last term, or in the last 10, and that's, by the way, that is not a critique of past administrations. Or you can vote for a vision for the future. We can't program our problems away. So that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. We want your voice to be heard on this campus. And if you are as passionate as we are and believed in anything we discussed here tonight, we encourage you to become active in SA through assembly, through cabinet. You can also keep up with us on our Instagram, DDSA_2021, to continue hearing your voices and hopefully having your needs met.
Thank you. Let's move now on to another student question. You mentioned that you have exemplified values of transparency and honesty. Do you feel SA is a transparent organization currently? What are your goals to make it more transparent for all students?
Yeah, this past administration, of which I served in for some period of time, has done a really great job at improving transparency. We have put a lot of resources that are not traditionally published and given to students on our website. And so yes, the transparency levels are quite good, but there's still, as always, a lot of progress to be made. And so we're talking about transparency in our values, and we're incorporating it in our policy points, and we hope to expand it in SA, putting more things on the website, letting students know how we're voting, what legislation we're passing, what we're talking about in meetings. It's important that students know what their elected fellow peers are doing on a weekly basis. So yes, we're at a fine place right now, but we're going to get even better in the future.
Yeah, just like David said, transparency doesn't just happen overnight. It doesn't happen just with one administration. It's a compounding effect that we have to build on, just like any of our policies, to really see change on this campus. So with us, we are just, taking that step forward and continuing what the current administration and previous administrations have been doing, and really initiating that transparency with the administration.
You recently released your Green New Deal for your administration. You mentioned that you want SA to be carbon neutral by May 2022 and the university carbon neutral 4 years after that. What do you propose to help the university achieve that goal as well as SA itself?
Yeah, well look, the university has to get carbon neutral. I want to explain really quickly why. In the past, we've been told as people, as students, that to solve this climate crisis, we have to do it personally. It is an issue of personal responsibility, when we're arguing that that's not necessarily the case. Of course, a student is making an impact when they decide to reuse a bag rather than use a single-use plastic one. But we have to go further as an institution, because that is where ultimately the greatest impact comes from. So one, in the Green New Deal, we're talking about transparency as always with data. And the university has also made a lot of great steps in recent years to reduce carbon emissions, but we're not really totally clear on all of it, and so we'd like to know more. And then we'd also like to call on the university to take bold action to implement a lot of offsets so we can be carbon neutral as soon as possible. And SA plans to do the same thing. We're going to assess our probably very few emissions and offset them. And so we hope to do that by the end of our term, maybe even sooner. This is a generational issue. We are not leading this university right now. We're running as student leaders to hopefully make an impact. But student or university leadership right now, it's not a priority for them. And so we have to take that step towards carbon neutrality, towards going fossil fuel free, and make sure, ensure for our future, a green and clean future.
You're also calling for an overhaul of the Whitman curve. Why is that so important to you, and could you explain what that is for our viewers tonight who may not be familiar?
Yeah, I'm not a Whitman student, so I'm not totally clear on it myself. From what I understand, essentially, it is a pretty hefty curve where you could very well get an A in a class numerically, but ultimately be given a B+ or even a B based on the breakdown. Only a certain percentage of students are allowed to get an A in classes. It's meant to increase the rigor of the university, but in this time of COVID-19 where students are stressing about their academic success, we think it is worth considering changing the Whitman curve, and a lot of Whitman students have told us to do such a thing.
Agreed. I think the Whitman curve just puts an enormous amount of pressure on students that is not really necessary in promoting, I guess, the rigorousness of the college, the school. I think that students can still feel, that Whitman is a school that promotes hard work and dedication without the curve. So that's kind of our thought process with that.
Thank you both. We want to let you know, for our viewers, watching us on the Orange Television Network, then in about 2 or 3 minutes or so, our stream will end there, but you can continue watching as we do have a few more questions. Just go to the Citrus TV live stream that is up on YouTube. So let's talk about some other big topics that have been on students' mind the past few years. We know that the university has floated the idea of a 3-year housing requirement. Is that something that you would get behind?
No. Again, we are living in a time where the financial security of students is very uncertain, and having such a requirement would put students in a locked financial position where they have to commit a certain amount of dollars to the university. And again, with the real possibility of tuition and room and board continuing to increase, that will get even more expensive and detrimental to families' financial situation. So no, we do not support that.
Yeah, that puts a total amount of pressure on students financially, as David said. And it's unnecessary. I think one thing that this past year has taught us is that, you know, financially, that's not accessible to all students and all families. So we have to, again, see the needs of the students and meet them where they're at, instead of just, you know, increasing a policy like that.
More recently, marijuana's legalization in New York brought hope to students that they could start using it legally here at SU, around SU, but the university says they will comply with a federal law that prohibits the use of marijuana. Where do you stand on the use of marijuana usage on or near campus by students?
You know, the university is right to say that they will support federal law, because we are an institution that receives a lot of money from the federal government. And if they were to not do that, we would lose a lot of federal funds and see our tuition go up even more. So I respect that, but there is also, it seems, a sort of unsaid commitment to not necessarily enforce that to a degree, but to a point that will still appease the federal government and federal funding. I don't really have much else to say on that.
Yeah, and with that being said, like, we're students too. I'm not too informed on that, so I can't really speak about it. But from what I'm hearing, yeah, I think we would have to get more information with the institution in order to really develop an idea of how we feel about the topic in general. So.
Do you think that maybe the university should push the federal government for change on this specific issue?
You know, the point of this campaign is not necessarily to always engage in federal issues, but why not? The President of the United States went to this university, and I see no reason, as potential leaders of the student government here, to call on the President to, yes, legalize marijuana and the use of it, and to, at the very least, not take away federal funds for universities that don't necessarily comply. I think that would be a fairly good outcome. But yeah, I think also this issue comes down to health as well, and accessibility. Syracuse University is one of the top institutions for veterans, a lot of whom use medicinal marijuana for any number of conditions that they may have. And so having potentially a pretty strict enforcement of that could be really endangering for those students. So we're going to keep a close eye on that, but we've said what we said.
So let's talk about Greek life now. For many students at SU, it's obviously a big part of campus life, but as we have seen, they've had challenges. Here on campus, 16 Greek organs are listed as not being able to operate. An SU 2018 study found that just under 48% of students, or just under half of those people who are not in Greek life, believe that Greek life does not have a positive impact on SU. What side of that debate are you on?
I think for Syracuse, you know, it's a huge campus. We have different people from different walks of life, different perspectives, carrying different histories with them as well. So it's not fair to say a certain frat or for this reason is having this type of effect on the university and and allowing another frat just continually being active, unless obviously due to circumstances and not obeying rules. But I think that's a further topic that we need to go into as well, of determining, talking to students more on fraternity and how much that means to them. I know fraternity nationally have a very heavy history in this country. So it's definitely something we're open to learning about, because we don't know everything. We are students just like you. So definitely let us know in our Instagram about this topic if this is serious to you. We are willing to listen.
David, I know that you were very involved in the successful push to make changes to the SA Constitution. How would you take advantage of those changes now that that Constitution was also passed?
Yeah, so in our platform, we talk about being leaders who will ensure a smooth and very important transition into this new SA Constitution. We didn't get to communicate the Constitution super well because we just barely crossed the finish line. But what I'll say to you now is the assembly, the way that is apportioned is going to be different. There's going to be less apportionment for homes and colleges, but more apportionment for select communities. Veterans, international students, LGBTQIA students are going to be able to get their own specific seats, and that's a really good step. We're also overhauling our judicial branch, creating a Supreme Court and a trial court, and the executive branch is also being overhauled. We are going to have a completely new cabinet positions, and are going to even add more to address students' concerns better. Really looking forward to it. As someone who sometimes loves to get into the nitty-gritty of SA's rules and bylaws, I'm really looking forward to it. I won't engage in that too much, though, because this is a public debate and not everyone wants to really hear about that, though. If you're interested, though, as we've been saying, reach out to us on social media. I'll be happy to talk about it with you.
Thank you. Final question from us here. Other than something related to COVID, what do you think is the most important issue going forward on campus during your time that you would spend as SA president and vice president?
I think that's a very hard question to answer.
Yeah.
What I'll say is our top priority, I think throughout our entire term, for sure, is going to be financial accessibility. Ensuring that tuition is addressed for students, not just now, but in the long term. But again, this Green New Deal that we've brought forward is extremely important to us. Health and safety in the long term is extremely important to us. Overhauling DPS, extremely important. I'm not going to list off our whole policy agenda, but everything is really important. Again, we've been talking about the big ideas and the small ideas. We don't want to leave anything behind, and we want to boldly and emphatically support really important ideas that students want and need.
Agreed. I think financial accessibility is one of our top hitters with that, because that meets the bare minimum of, are you able to stay in this university and enjoy the student life experience that other policies may follow? So meeting that, I think, is definitely one of our top priorities. And again, we are, again, students. Maybe that top priority can change with the number of people reaching out of what people think. And again, we're just open, very open to learning and listening to students, because we don't know everything. We just really want to represent the students and hear from them and getting that better relationship with the administration.
David, Darnell, thank you very much. After the break, we will hear closing statements from the candidates. We'll be right back.
They call me Maxie, but I prefer tripod. I was your above-average four-legged homie, and then wham, bam, minivan. Some people pity me. Now that's lame. I still run, fetch, and swim. And the ladies love me. I'm the ultimate wingman. Just don't ask me to high five.
Welcome back. We are reaching the end of tonight's essay town hall forum. We now go to the candidates' closing remarks. The presidential, vice presidential, and comptroller candidates will have 1 minute to give any final messages to the SU community. We will start with Nia Jones. Nia.
Thank you. As previously mentioned, being more transparent, accessible, and open to change are 3 things that I value and think are pertinent to the comptroller role. As individuals and a student body, we are constantly changing and adapting and are challenged to think about things differently. Seeing how we as a Syracuse community have adapted to the changes that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought upon us, I have been inspired by the student body's resilience. It is this resilience and change that I want to bring to the comptroller role. My experience in finance board makes me qualified. My knowledge of the current finance code will make me competent. But it is my participation on campus as a student, a classmate, a friend, a member of various organizations, and a friendly face and a listening ear that will allow me to allow you to get your voice heard. As you all head to my slice for the elections next week, I would like you all to keep the following 3 words in mind: transparency, accessibility, and change. That is what you will get with Nia Jones as your 2021-2022 comptroller. Thank you.
Thank you, Nia. We're going to take a moment to let our presidential and vice presidential candidates get back in place for their closing remarks. We're going to start with just Darnell for her closing remarks, and we're going to hear from them both individually. Darnell?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for staying tuned and listening to our thoughts and what we have to say about our policies and what we're passionate about. As you can see, we really want your voices to be heard as students. If you are as passionate as we are and believed in anything that we discussed here tonight, we really strongly encourage you to participate and be a part of SA Assembly somehow, through cabinet, in any way, just get involved. Keep up with us on our Instagram, DM us anything that are pressing issues, questions that you want clarification on at DDSA_2021 for more information. We want to continue to share your voices and joining us to create a better SU for everyone. And in fostering that, the change starts with all of us. So thank you.
And thank you, Darnell. Finally here, we are going to go to our presidential candidate, David Bruin, for his closing remarks. David?
Thank you. We're asking you to vote in this election, not just for us as people, but for the vision for the future that we're offering. We want to reimagine the way that this university works, but we can't do it without you. Students want and need change. We've known this for a long time now. But getting the change requires a groundswell of widespread student support. That's why we're asking for you to vote for us on My Slice starting April 26th and throughout the week, so that together we can change SU forever. Thank you.
David, thank you. And that's all the time we have for you tonight. Citrus TV Student Association Town Hall Forum. Voting will open next Monday, April 26th. For the latest on the election, make sure to turn to our live newscast. We have live news 6 days a week at 6 p.m. on weekdays, 11:30 a.m. on Saturdays. We have shows in Spanish, shows that focus on politics. Make sure to catch all of our sports shows as well, and our entertainment shows that are going throughout the week. We're also on social media. You can follow us on Twitter at CitrusTV News for the latest updates on the election, and check out our website at CitrusTV.com. We'd like to thank the candidates and SA for agreeing to this forum. From all of us here at Citrus TV, I'm Ricky Sayer. Have a good night and a better tomorrow.